The stock market's not the economy. And one of the better ways that we can view even our dollar isn't even by looking at the dollar, but by looking at other strings that are moving. The best way that we can look at the current state of our economy is normally the bond market. And the best way we can usually view the strength of our currency and our economy is by looking at physical metals. And if you looked at them today, well, silver is up 5%. It's up above 80 now. Gold's up again. Palladium's up. Platinum's up 6%. The bond market is also responding by throwing 10-year yields higher, now 14 basis points higher than the beginning of December. The movements that have been happening really since the summer, I'll just say post-tariff announcements, really where it started. There's some causation versus correlation there, but we've had poor bond market auctions because foreign buyers aren't buying our debt anymore. We're seeing all these precious metals rips because the dollar is getting weaker. And let's be real. You threw the comment up right before I was going to say it. All war is for the betterment of financiers. We've known since the Rothschilds controlled both sides in the Napoleonic Wars, back before when they got involved in our War of 1812, back before they tried to finance the Civil War and Abraham Lincoln said, nah, back before we even had a centralized bank and we were state bank run. But by World War II, we needed more money. By the way, the first thing we financed after we created our Federal Reserve was World War I. Wars are banker wars, and there's money to be made. And I think that's one of the reasons we're doing it. And if you want to look on the side of, hey, this is just the way things are, financially, probably a solid move. We're getting control of oil, strategically located right around the Gulf of Mexico. We have heavy oil refineries in the southern region of our country that are underutilized. They have a heavy supply of heavy oil. Strategically, it makes sense. It sucks you have to go kidnap a leader in the middle of the night to make it make sense, though.
Yeah, and I think that to go forward and understand what's coming, we first need to go back. And I think you're one of the best people that we can speak to on where did this whole thing start, right? Because everyone says the way things are in terms of the fact that all wars are for bankers. How did that system get built where this is the norm?
That's a great question. The start and why it's where it's at today, I'd say there's like 3 dates. So 1907 is one, 1944 would be the next, and then I would go right to 1980. So in 1907, we had a state bank panic. We had a bunch of banks said, we do not have enough money to supply our account holders with what they have. The reason for that, and it wasn't uncommon, was we had a famine, a couple back to back, and we're an agricultural economy. The way that it would work is a farmer who needs all of their supply, all of their seed, all the mechanics that are going to make their farm operate. They need it up front because they can't actually pay themselves until they sell it. So they would take out these big loans. And then when they had a famine, there was an issue with getting that loan paid back. And so we had a state bank panic. This is when the billionaire said, here's our opportunity. We now had the opportunity to create a centralized banking system. And in 1910, they met at Jekyll Island at a secret meeting that they lied to their families about. They said it was a duck hunting trip. They only used their first name so they couldn't be recognized, sat in a private train cab, made their way for a 6-day meeting where a man named Nelson Aldrich, a senator, wrote down all the plans, claimed they were his, and presented it to Congress. First got denied, then a boat sank, then it got approved. And after that, we kind of were locked into the system where monetary policy, money printing, and all is run by a select few men. And even Woodrow Wilson, president at the time, said, I've unknowingly handed our country into the hands of a few wealthy men. Go to 1944. Now we have World War II coming to the end, and we have Bretton Woods. Bretton Woods is when we got all of the world together to say, hey, by the way, you need our dollar. Reason being, gold. We have lots of it. And we tied our dollar to gold. It was, I believe, $35 an ounce. And we allowed everyone else's currencies to get pegged to it. This was our attempt at global dominance with the dollar. Flash forward to the 70s. We know we removed that. The whole entire span of the 70s was awful for the middle class. We have an oil embargo, the savings crisis, the Yom Kippur war overseas. And then Reagan steps in and says, I'm going to make America great again. Which, by the way, that was his slogan.
Yeah.
He had that slogan first. I'm going to make America great again. And then we have the detethering of regulations, the destruction of unions, tax bracket shifts in 81 and 85. And that's where we set in place this trickle down effect. This, hey, just let us get the money at the top for a while and eventually it will come down. And then 5 years later, and then 10 years later, and then 20 years later, and then 40 years later, we're wondering when it's going to trickle down. The wealth gap is fueled and expanded upon by billionaire greed and lust for power. They set it in place in 1913, they globalized it in 1944, and they adjusted fire in the 70s after everything started to break in the Nixon shock to now what we have today, which we are a company country that protects the oil industry. And as long as the petrodollar is flowing, so is our economy. And yeah, that could be a nihilistic way of viewing it. But the honest part of it is if we don't continue to print money and we don't continue these regime change in oil rich countries, there is a stark threat to our debt based economy.
Do you mind talking a little bit more about the petrodollar? Because we understood in the 70s that we got away from the gold standard,
Mhm.
but do you have a little bit of the knowledge of the history around like how we actually created the petrodollar system after that?
It's a little conspiratorial because no one really actually gets the connection too heavily. Henry Kissinger was directly involved in this and he negotiated with the OPEC countries. But the reason it started was because of the Yom Kippur War. In the early weeks of October in Israel, there was an attack from Syria and Egypt on the Israeli people, uh, very eerily similar to the October attacks we had in 2023. And this ambush attack led us to say, oh, we need to go be the security guard for Israel. When we did this, the oil producing countries said, we don't like that because we don't like them. We're not going to give you as much oil anymore. When that happened, we had to do something about it. So what we did, because we had just gotten off the gold standard, the last thing we need is that. So what we did is we went to what's the actual name?
The
OPEC?
oil producing,
Yeah,
exporting countries, something like OPEC.
OPEC. And Henry Kissinger got with him and said, hey, look, we're going to create this petrodollar. We know you're mad at us, by the way. We know you're ticked. We're going to create this petrodollar idea, which means that all the oil you're selling is sold in our dollar. And in exchange, we're going to protect you too and let us use weapons. A lot of tinfoil hat wearers would say that negotiation doesn't make too much sense because they were mad at us for protecting an enemy of theirs. And we walked in and said, hey, we're just going to take over the system. Doesn't really make a ton of sense. What a lot of people think happened at that meeting is we decided, hey, we're going to use our military superpower in America to protect the oil industry. And leading now to Venezuela, it seems like we're still doing the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, right on. I think what's happening right now is the extension of trying to extend this petrodollar system because the reason the petrodollar system was so important was because once you detach the dollar from gold,
Mhm.
no one had a reason to use the dollar. There was no reason
Yeah,
for
it
the
became
US dollar
fiat.
to
Yep.
remain dominant. Yeah, it was backed by nothing other than the military might of the United States of America. That was when that officially became the rule, right? Is the rule of why you use the dollar is because if you don't, then someone's gonna get you. It's classic mafia move, right? Classic mob move. Oh, you need our protection, right? Somebody's gonna come and get you. So now you move forward, and what's happening here is that we continue to print dollars in excess of what it is that there's a demand for these dollars. And so when we do that, other countries are saying, well, actually, wait a minute. I don't know that I want your dollars anymore. And in
Yes.
fact, I could probably use gold.
Yes.
And so now we have to say, okay, well, the US has to do something to prevent this from continuing to happen. And when you look at a country like Venezuela, right here in our backyard, we've got all these other reasons why we can go and say we need to go in and take over Venezuela. Their president isn't even legitimate. They're selling drugs here.
Mhm.
All these different reasons. But a big part of it is, well, technically, we need to get control over the oil market as well, because otherwise, we've got these OPEC countries. You've got Saudi Arabia that might not necessarily need our protection anymore. Okay, they might have other ways of going around everything that's happening as far as using the dollar to do trade with other countries. And if
Yeah, and
they
this is
start
where
to say we
you
don't want
get,
it,
get
then
BRICS involved, and you start talking
exactly.
about those countries. Yeah.
So yeah, that's it. But
Well, it's interesting you
yeah,
brought it up too, because a lot of people would say that the culmination of those mistakes was felt in 2008, and that we got to the point where we had the opportunity to kind of let the system reset a little bit. And instead, we invented quantitative easing.
Yep.
And by the third batch of quantitative easing, the biggest one at the time, which was the third, the seemingly also most unnecessary, was also when we started to see these drop offs in foreign demand for our investment. Gold reserve holdings of our dollar, bond purchases, even investment in our country starting to drop. A lot of that's due to the fact of, just like any investor, if you were holding pick something. If you're on Pokemon cards, you had 10 really rare Pikachus and you were holding on to them dearly, and you're like, I'm going to hold these on, all these four. Yeah, there you go, dude. Yep, Pikachu's
I
right
can't
there.
see it.
Ben, you got
There.
all these cards, right? You're holding on to them. This is your net worth. This is how you're going to retire, okay? These 10 cards are worth so much. And then the very person who created the original ones starts printing thousands more. What does that do to yours? It
Devalues them.
devalues them drastically. And these countries that are holding billions and billions and at one point trillions worth of our debt, seeing that we're being irresponsible and printing and printing and printing, it's leading other countries to just think, maybe I need to hold something else. And silver and gold and even copper and platinum are kind of showing the undercurrent of the tides of this economy. Though certain numbers, like we alluded to earlier, the stock market, cryptos, there are ways to have your money go up, but that does not mean that the undercurrent of the system isn't slowly, unfortunately, kind of detethering.
Yeah, and they're at the point now where they're rebranding even what they call quantitative easing, right? With
Reserve management.
yes,
Yep.
exactly.
Yep.
And so, where does this go from here, right? So you mentioned how things picked up, how bad things have gotten since '08 because of the decisions that they made to not let it fall over. They pushed it forward, kicked the can down the line. If anyone watching this seems like, okay, this has been going on for a long time, but the impact is felt faster and faster each time they do this. So how long can you continue to kick the can down the line before you got to pay up?
We don't have any historical evidence to know. One thing I can tell you is we're going to keep kicking the can.
Yes.
The reserve management, I don't think that the current rate that we have in, I think it's 40 billion a month, which annualizes just under a half trillion for the year. I don't think that's nearly enough. I do think we're going to print more at a
I
higher
agree.
pace, and that means assets go up. It means assets get squeezed. If we know Richard Kantian and its Kantian effect, that the people closest to the money printer get the richest, asset holders, bank leaders, governments get the richest. You got to hold assets because more than likely that is the easiest way to ride along with the ever inflating system.
Hey, you made it to the end of the clip. That means you're probably enjoying this. And if so, just know that you can catch us live every Tuesday and Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern. And if you want to see the full version of this episode, you can click the link in the description down below. Otherwise, YouTube thinks that you will enjoy this next.